He built a successful wealth management firm, co-founded a fast-growing software company serving financial advisors, sold both, and retired at age 44. Mike McDaniel now spends his time in philanthropy, helping entrepreneurs, fly fishing, and pickleballing from his home base in Wyoming with his wife Julianne and 2 adult daughters not too far away. And of course, he was my co-founder at Riskalyze. So even though he and I never had a bad one ourselves, let's find out about his worst meeting ever. It's good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, great to see you.
Thank you for joining Worst Meeting Ever. So tell us, what was most interesting about moving to Wyoming in the middle of COVID with 2 teenagers?
Moving to Wyoming with 2 teenagers during COVID was an extremely interesting experience for a father.
Okay.
We moved to the middle of nowhere, Wyoming.
Right.
And when you take 2 beautiful girls from California and you drop them into the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, I like to say I met every high school junior and senior boy in Park County. So that was the most interesting part of that experience.
That's fun. I love it. That's great. So you were chief investment officer at Riskalyze, the company we co-founded, and that meant that you would talk to regulators, you would talk to compliance people, you would speak on stage about our methodology. How many meetings do you think you were averaging every week in that job?
I would say I was averaging at least 15. My chief of staff at the time would probably tell you just under 40.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So hit us. Worst meeting ever. Please don't say it was one of our one-on-ones.
Yeah, definitely not one of our one-on-ones. I can say that one of the reasons I loved getting involved with this solution was because that was one of the things that over time we learned how to do really well, and it was a gift of yours. So when I heard you were starting something in this space, making meetings, brilliant instead of painful, I was like, there's probably not a better person to do that. So it wouldn't be one of our one-on-ones.
Thank you.
Having said that, I was on a board that I just finished a 3-year term on, and it was a nonprofit, and I acted as secretary. So the worst meeting I participated in and had some responsibility in, I'm sad to say. And that was, we had a decent agenda that we put together.
Okay.
We had 8 of 10 of the board members show up to the meeting. So the time, place, location, and agenda were kind of in order.
Yeah.
And yet we seem to maybe use a benefit of getting to know your fellow board members, but we seem to get off on rabbit trails more often than not. And in fact, this specific meeting, we had 2 specific items that were time critical and really the reason for the meeting.
Sure.
These two instances. These meetings typically last an hour for us.
Okay.
And we got probably a half hour in, and I remember glancing down at my notes. Again, I was secretary taking meeting notes, and I had nothing written down. And it wasn't because there wasn't plenty of words being spoken. There was nothing of substance that we had accomplished in 30 minutes.
Wow.
And so when we look back...
Who's running the meeting? Who's facilitating?
That's a great question. The president was facilitating, or should I say attempting to facilitate. Okay. And I think there was a dynamic in the room. It was the president's first meeting, at the head, head of the organization.
Got it.
And I think a little bit of it intimidated, and then also, let's just say inexperienced.
Okay.
And so I think that was a key ingredient to the failure of that meeting.
Yeah.
So, to expand on that, meeting typically lasts an hour. At about an hour and a half, board members start excusing themselves from the meeting, kind of just saying, just
looks like I gotta go.
Just crying uncle. There's multiple conversations going on, so they're able to kind of bow out without anybody calling them on it. But that was the worst experience I've had in a meeting in quite some time. Mostly because instead of an hour-long meeting, it turned into a 2-hour-long meeting, and neither of the 2 objectives that we had to accomplish during that meeting got taken care of.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if this meeting was a movie, what would the movie have been called?
Oh boy. I think it would probably be an animated movie about a dog that was trying to get something done, and yet there were squirrels everywhere. So I'd probably call the movie Squirrels, and it'd be this dog that has an objective to go about his day and just can't seem to get anything done because there's too many squirrels.
I love it. How many people were in the room for this? What was the size of the group? Did you say 8?
Yeah, there are eight board members that were there, and
Yeah.
maybe one or two employees of the board that were also present at the meeting.
And so 2 critical objectives, we get to an hour and a half. We haven't accomplished any of them. People start filtering out of the room. Do you think at this moment, like, does that board president kind of like understand how far off the rails things are? Or was he just kind of like really just not kind of like present?
Yeah, the board president tried a couple times very softly to bring the discussion back to those items. And in hindsight, I wish I had done a better job. But at the same time, when you've got, there's dynamics in the room that you're trying to pay attention to. There was a new president, and no one wanted to, you could tell the president was intimidated. And so he didn't feel like it would help, to basically point out call it the weekness of, that the meeting was off track.
Yeah. And in all the conversations that were going on, would you call these pinball conversations? You know what I'm talking about? Like, think about a pinball machine and like the balls just like jumping around everywhere. Or were people just like, was it literally like the rabbit trail where people just got focused on the wrong thing and just kept following it?
Yeah, I would say it was a combination of both.
Okay.
And to add to that...
the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, the worst of both worlds. And a good portion of the meeting, there were multiple conversations going on at the same time. So you can imagine as a secretary trying to keep us on track for 2 specific agenda items. You have multiple groups that are talking about different things that have nothing to do with the actual objective. Gosh. So, they were more enjoyable topics to talk about because the 2 topics that we had to talk about were not enjoyable topics. Okay. And so, it was a little bit of it was probably everybody was a little bit anxious about the topics at hand.
The subject at hand.
And they'd rather talk about, the fundraiser that's coming up and, how we're going to change things the following year for a different fundraiser and things that are a little bit more creative than difficult conversations.
Those are probably fun meeting notes.
Yeah, I actually did not take much because I keep my meeting notes very concise, and it was objective 1. There were no notes next under it. Objective 2, no notes under it.
So how did it kind of people start filtering out? Like whenever this thing that was kind of a meeting, came to an end. What was kind of the feeling afterward, and like what was it down to just you and the president, and you guys were like looking at each other, or like how did it come to a conclusion?
I think the president was one of the first to leave, and that was more of a time thing where it's typically an hour meeting. Yeah, the president's got children to get home to, and so took off pretty quickly. But the sentiment was overwhelmingly, well, it was a waste of time.
Yeah,
just overwhelming that it was a waste of time.
How many of us have been in meetings that we get to the end of it and it feels like that? But you hope that those are 15s or 30s, not 90s.
Yeah.
If you had a time machine, like, was this meeting fixable or was it kind of doomed from the start?
Yeah, I do think it was fixable. We set up some of the foundation. We had an agenda. Everyone knew where we were meeting, which for this specific nonprofit, we would change locations. And so there's always an excuse or two as to why someone couldn't make it or that kind of thing. But all those kind of foundational things felt like they were in place enough to accomplish, again, those 2 decisions that we needed to make. And yet when we got in the room, there really was no leadership. There was I would say in hindsight, a lack of experience or maybe just confidence of the president to crack whips on us and focus us. Yeah. And basically let this, if we were the dogs in the animated short, we were chasing squirrels the whole time.
So like what ended up happening? You just had to schedule it again? Like, was second time the charm?
Yeah, great
Hopefully
question.
not third time's the charm.
So we actually it turned into an email thread. Okay. So now we've taken what should have been, in my opinion, a half hour, an hour long meeting, and we've turned it into an email thread to then get us to a second meeting, right? So the email thread, I can just remember we had 15, folks on the email thread,
right?
That are all responding and replying.
Super productive.
Just completely inefficient.
Absolutely.
And then, yes, we put together another meeting. And the meeting we were able to accomplish mostly because we had such a time crunch for the decisions that it was forced upon us that we had to make a decision. We kind of had to look at these tough 2 objectives of the meeting and say we can't lollygag around and talk about the things that we'd rather be talking about. We've got to address these. And so they finally did get addressed.
That's awesome. So tell us about the best meeting you've ever been in.
Yeah, I've been in, as I said, we got to work together. So we had a lot of good meetings.
We did.
But I will say, fairly recently, another nonprofit organization that I help out with put together a really concise meeting. And I was really impressed with the amount of, call it content, decisions that were made in a very tight time slot. I think we might have spent a little over an hour in this meeting.
Wow.
And when I looked at the agenda, I thought, boy, this could be a 2 or 3 hour meeting with the amount of substance that we had on the agenda. And the executive director that ran that meeting was extremely prepared, set expectations from the outgo really well. There were pre-meeting homework that a handful of us had. I had a project that I was reporting on and getting a decision on.
Yep.
And everyone came to the meeting well prepared. And we were able to knock out a considerable amount of agenda items in what I thought was a very efficient amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing what a little bit of preparation can do in that regard. It's hard work, but it's amazing what a little bit of preparation can do. What do you think? I mean, maybe the answer is preparation, but what do you think was the biggest factor? Like, if you think about that massive gap that exists between the best meeting you just talked about and the worst meeting that you just talked about, what's the biggest factor creating the gap between the two?
Yeah, I think in those two examples, the gap would have been experience running a meeting, or maybe call it leadership.
Okay.
And it could be boiled down to confidence in running a meeting. So when you're convinced as the leader of the meeting that you've got a good agenda in place and that you're able to focus your team to make a decision, I think that was the difference between those potential meetings. I think setting expectations, which the agenda does a little bit of, but also the lead of the meeting should actually set expectations. Maybe it's, here's how long we're going to spend on each agenda item, or we are not moving on to the next one until we finish the one that we're talking about.
Conclusion here,
right? So this exactly.
Yeah. What have you learned about how to affect the outcome of meetings throughout your career?
Boy, I think a big part of it is expectations, and that can be supported by a number of things. We talked about having an agenda, but I also think having consistency in meetings. So as I think through the best meetings that I've had, as a participant or as a lead, what to expect throughout that meeting. So maybe it's a consistent agenda outline, right? Or maybe it's a consistent length of a meeting. So if you know that you have someone, the lead is someone that starts meetings on time and tries to get them done in a certain time, you tend not to see participants, meander around topics or take that time and go into maybe talking about personal stuff or non-agenda items. And so all of that comes back to, in my opinion, setting a good expectation.
That's great. So, as we wrap up our time together, what is one piece of advice that you'd give to somebody whose job it is to run meetings?
Yeah, I would say take advantage of this leadership opportunity. And maybe you consider a weakness of yours, maybe it's a strength, but take advantage of this. This is your opportunity to shine. And I've seen countless times, maybe it's a new manager, maybe it's someone that's put into a position on a nonprofit board, that when they lean into it and really focus on being a leader, they have the confidence, whether you're a new manager or someone that stepped into a new role at a nonprofit or otherwise. And that is, knowing that you've got the preparation required in a meeting, maybe put together your agenda properly, that'll give you confidence. But know that you've been put in that position as the leader of that meeting because others around you, and likely the people that are in that meeting, have confidence in you. So have the confidence to keep that meeting, on track. Don't apologize, and don't feel
be confident in being an active leader.
Yeah, be confident in being an active leader. You've been put in a leadership position because you are capable.
Yeah.
And so get the meeting, dialed from a preparation standpoint, and lean into that leadership role as you run the meeting.
Love it. Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Mike.
Yeah.
Worst Meeting Ever is brought to you by Contio. What if AI could kill your broken meetings? Find out how at Contio.ai.